Hello, my name is Falterfire, and I am once again recording a Breach Wanderers run. Uh, because more than 0 people watched the last two, so if literally anybody is watching them, I am vain enough to keep recording the sounds of myself talking. So once again, this is still on the same game version as the last two videos, 04515. This is again shortly after Depth 3 release, but we don't have any balance patches. This run, I mean, the title should have told you, but this will be a Raodan. I think that's how you pronounce it, Raodan. That's how I am going to pronounce it anyway. Run, and I am going to start by just buying things from the market. I don't think I need the Phoenix Feather, and even though I am technically still slowly gaining money, even if I buy everything from the market, often I will only buy 4 things. So I wanted to start by going over the deck itself, in part because unlike the Raodan deck, which is pretty well refined at this point, this Raodan deck I haven't finished tweaking. Like I have won with it several times, but I am not fully satisfied with where it's at, so I wanted to go over the cards before we got started. So before we go over the cards, though, it's worth going over, because I do have all the characters at level 10, it's worth going over all of their effects, to talk all of the passives, to figure out what cards will work best with that. So unlike some other characters, Raodan has several passives that are fairly generic. They work with any deck, and regardless of what deck you're doing, they will sort of still just be generally useful. So for example, he gets 2 additional mana at the beginning of every turn, and he draws an extra card at the beginning of every turn. So just overall, we're going to have more resources. Also, we are going to want to trip statuses, because every time we trip a status, we're going to get growth. And as you get more growth, you get more mana per turn. So we're going to start at, I think it's 4 per turn, just because of the first passive, and then if we can get up to 24 growth, you get an additional mana per turn for every 6 growth you have, up to a max of +4, which means that, or is it +5? I can't remember. I think it's +4, which means that we will get up to like 8 mana per turn, and then we also will deal 30% bonus damage to frozen targets, which means that freezing things is good. And freezing things is always good anyway, but so the starting deck is fairly straightforward here. Chilling Focus, I think you just always are going to want Chilling Focus in your Raodan deck. You're going to want 2 copies. It is very good. It synergizes incredibly well with Powerful, or anything that will provide, or any items that provide a flat increase to the amount of status you get per status application. We have Resolute Focus, which is 3 mana if the last card you played this turn was a skill. And we have a lot of cards that apply status that are skills and not spells. We have Meditate. We only have 1 copy, because I don't really think you need multiple copies in your starting deck, and your starting deck is kind of tightly packed as it is. This is going to give us a couple extra stacks of growth, but more importantly, it's going to give us Adept, which is like Mighty, but instead of increasing how much damage you do base, it increases how much status you apply. Our other source of Adept is Visions of Frost, which applies 10 frost by default, but can be increased by various things. And then if any enemy is frozen after we've applied the frost, and it doesn't have to be the enemy that we applied the frost to, just as long as at least 1 enemy is frozen, we get Adept 2 and Mighty 2. And then we have Infuse, which applies Arcane, because I wanted the ability to get Arcane procs, because those do damage. They clear off status effects. They're just generally useful to be able to do out of the gate. And as far as our primary damage output, though, Infuse can do damage, but mostly we're relying on these Magic Blasts and these Ice Blasts. So the question you may ask is why we're using Magic Blast instead of Pierce, and the answer is that I find that I don't like relying on things having to be frozen. I would rather have just the straight up +10, the straight up extra damage for Magic Blast. And also, if we get to the mid boss and we don't have a better upgrade, Magic Blast Plus dealing 20 damage is very useful for helping us just solve problems. So our other card we have here is Invigorate. Now, Invigorate I like a lot because it's a way to just passively get some healing, because if it's in your hand and in a turn it heals you. But also, Raodan can actually afford to pay 8 relatively frequently, which means that Raodan will actually be able to get this extra shield and sturdy some amount of the time. And this is our only way to actually generate shield in the base deck. So this does double duty as a way to heal in case we aren't able to clear out early fights quickly enough, while also giving us a way to actually generate shield if we need to. So looking at the actual card pool. So I'm going to start by going over the epics because they are in their own separate category. So Mana Eruption gives us mana equal to 25% of our maximum mana. We are getting a lot of growth, which is going to increase our maximum mana, which means that Mana Eruption can produce a lot of mana for us. We have Dispel Magic, which just tends to be good against everything, especially in depth 3. It will help us deal with our own curse stacks. It will help us deal with enemies stacking plated or powerful or similar, because we will have some arcane, which will help us remove some stacks from the enemies, but having Dispel Magic will help a lot with overall solving things. So Peace of Mind, this is one of the cards I'm considering swapping out. It gives us Purity, which I like having ways to get Purity. It gives us Adept, and it's always nice to have more to ensure that we have Adept, although multiple Adept stacks aren't necessarily useful, because if you have 2 stacks of Adept, then you're good for 2 turns. And if you can find another Adept card before that runs out, if you end the fight with 5 Adepts, that means you had 5 stacks of Adept. That means you had 4 stacks of Adept that did nothing for you. So Peace of Mind is useful as a way if we end up needing more Adept, but if we don't, then it doesn't do much. Empower we're running because Empower is just pretty much always good. It helps you. One of the main things Empower does for you is that if you can find any ways to get powerful or plated, whether that's from a card in your actual deck or from a monster card, which for plated it's probably going to be a monster card, Empower lets you up how much of that you have, which is very good, in addition to just being able to increase your Adept, being able to increase your growth, being able to increase your wits, all of that. Aether Storm is just an incredibly efficient damaging spell. It, strictly speaking, doesn't do anything in particular that we care about directly, but it does do, when upgraded, 16 damage to all enemies, and it helps, I believe I talked about this in a previous video, but it really helps against the Drakes in Area 2 with just dealing with all of their evade in one go. Then we have Cursed Conjunction, which applies Arcane and then is going to apply Curse. We can usually trip at least the Frozen, so we can get at least 4 Curse out of it. So it'll be 12 Arcane and 4 Cursed on an enemy, and that's pretty good. And then we have Frost Wave, which is going to be card draw, that is also going to potentially freeze things. This one can be a bit borderline if we aren't at a position where we feel like we can comfortably freeze things, but normally Raodan can, because that's kind of one of our main things. Blizzard is a card I'm considering cutting. It is damage, and it is applying Frostbite and some Frost, but I think I'm going to actually remove this in favor of Elemental Conflux, because this is potentially plus 6 growth from if we trip all 3 status effects, which is pretty good, and then that helps potentially set up other things. We're going to keep Singularity because we like having the damage. So the reason that I'm going to swap out, the other swap I'm going to make, after having played the deck a bit and played other decks, is I'm going to swap out Peace of Mind for Charged Shield. And the reason I'm going to do this is that Charged Shield gives us these Aftershocks, which potentially will allow us to get additional, because we otherwise don't have ways to apply Shock, so this gives us a way to apply Shocked. And that also, while applying Shocked, will get us more growth because of Raodan's passive. So that's what we're going to do with that. So the other cards, we have a whole lot of cards here. So let's talk through them. Because there are 30 total cards in the pool. 21 of them are not epic, are going to be commons and rares. And so we have Arms Race, which I don't think I'm going to run because we don't have strikes really. Arms Race is incredibly good if you have any strikes. It is substantially less interesting if you don't. Burst of Strength I don't like because getting powerful for only one turn, even if it doesn't cost you any mana. It is hard to get enough payoff, I find, to justify spending a full card on this effect. Even if you get powerful 2 this turn, the upgrade, like I don't love it. Cultivate, growth 6 is great. It is immediately takes you to the threshold of getting +1 mana per turn. And in addition to that, once it has flipped, you are then drawing, it then turns into a card draw spell. So it is generating mana and drawing cards, and those are both things we love. I'm not actually running Hunt in this deck because this deck is relatively low on outright damage sources, and Hunt doesn't do anything if we haven't done damage in advance. That may be wrong. I may actually want Hunt. And that's a card to keep in mind if we decide that we want to swap out anything. So as for, I like having a lot of mana cards in my pool. So the mana cards I've got here are Icy Concentration, which is 5 mana if an enemy is frozen. Mind Seed, which gives us growth. So Mind Seed, speeding up our growth is both useful and sometimes not. The reason it's sometimes not is once you get past 24 growth, the benefits of getting additional growth drop off pretty drastically. But I tend to find that even with a Raodan deck, we need stuff like Mind Seed in order to hit that growth as quickly as possible. Ruining Focus is extra mana if we've played a spell. We usually have enough spells to trip this. Likewise, Predator's Focus. I said that we can't count on tripping Hunt, but we can usually get close enough that Predator's Focus isn't too much of a risk, and it does still give us 2 mana even if we can't. So Pact of Insight is another card that I might consider here. Pact of Insight, you basically only want Pact of Insight if one of 2 things is true. Either you have some way to ensure that you don't care about the 2 shrivels on top. So for example, if you're running a discard deck, then you draw your 2 cards, and then if you end up drawing the shrivels, you can just discard them to your discard outlets and it's fine. Or if you're playing Catan and you just are drawing 2 and then there is no next turn, so you will not be drawing any shrivels. Or if you're playing something like Drophus and losing the life is actually just upside. Pact of Insight on Drophus is incredibly good because you can heal back the life that you lost. Losing the life gives you a blood burst, and it's just all around a good time. But I don't think here we want that because we don't have enough healing to counterbalance that, and we are going to be going to extra turns. So, all right. So Arcane Bolt is drawing us a non-mana card, and it is applying 3 Arcane. Both of those things are things we are happy to do. 1 Arcane isn't, or 3 Arcane isn't that much, but we have other ways to output Arcane, so I don't like Arcane Bolt if you don't otherwise have ways to output Arcane, but because we have the Infuse in our base deck, because we have a few other Arcane cards in our pool, because we will be increasing our status output, I like Arcane Bolt. Increasing Visions gives us a way to draw spells. I go back and forth on how much I like this one. It's possible that I would rather have, I think I'm actually going to swap it out for Read the Ice. I'm not sure that's correct, but so Read the Ice is draw 1, we draw 1 more per frozen enemy, which means if we don't have any frozen enemies, then we basically have paid 1 mana to just do, we have paid 1 mana to do nothing, which is not the worst. Like it is better than spending 1 mana and, sorry, it's not that we've spent 1 mana to do nothing, it's we've spent 1 mana to replace the card, which is important because if we spend 1 mana, so like Spark, if we play Spark and we don't have any other ways to generate shock in our deck, and we paid 1 mana and we have done nothing. We have spent a card and paid a mana and nothing happened. But because Read the Ice replaces itself, we are completely fine with spending the card on with spending the mana. And then the upside here is that we potentially draw more, and paying 1 mana to draw 2 without a downside is very good. You'll notice that we're also running Brainstorm, which is draw 2, and we gained overcharged 1. So we're potentially shocking ourselves for Brainstorm, and we're still happy to run it because the fact that Brainstorm can draw us non-mana or can draw us mana in addition to non-mana is very valuable. So our other cards here, we've got Icy Chains, which applies weak, which is good, and it applies frost based on our max mana. I've mentioned before, our max mana is going up. Everything that keys off of maximum mana we're running because our maximum mana is going to be very high. Power Surge is a flat, gives us powerful. Powerful is a flat increase to our ability to do Frost, which again is particularly valuable with like our chilling focuses. So we're going to take that. Cleansing Shield, I just generally like in every deck. When you get to Area 3, you are going to be taking a lot of Curse, a lot of other status effects as well, potentially, and Cleansing Shield just fixes all of that. Plus, having Cleansing Shield is great if you have stuff like Brainstorm, or if you have the, there's a trinket that is draw 3 and you gain Arcane Leak 1. If you play that trinket, then you play Cleansing Shield, you are very happy. Then we have Mental Growth. Mental Growth is a card that I go back and forth on. It is 2 mana to do nothing right now, but it is ultimately, because there aren't that many ways to get mana boost, and this will probably be our only way to get mana boost. It is functionally 2 mana to get eventually a total of 4 and 3 growth, which counts towards a bunch of other things. Mental Growth is a card that I go back and forth on though, because it does cost mana to do nothing yet. And I'm an impatient person, and I like being able to do things now. Dang it. Regrowth is a card that I keep considering adding. I may make the swap of Mental Growth for Regrowth, because I usually don't run Regrowth because I'm bad at remembering when I need to sequence it in. But I think it has a lot of potential, and so it's very tempting to me. So I think I am going to make that swap. The other card that I was considering swapping in was Hunt, which we talked about earlier. So Spirit Helm gets us shield, gets us growth. We want some amount of shield gain, so that's good. Stone Skin doesn't outright do anything for us necessarily, so we're not running that. Surprise Attack, though, I like Surprise Attack basically everywhere. Vulnerable increases both damage taken and stats from cards. That's very good. This applies to all enemies, and so if we have a Surprise Attack, after we play it for 2 turns, all of our damage and status is increased by 30%. We have 50% chance of critical and everything. It's just very, very good. So Arcane Strike I like in almost every deck except Raodan, because Raodan we're just not doing that many hits, so we can't get enough value to justify it. We're not running any of these. Icy Orb is theoretically a good way to just straight up apply Frost. I'm not a huge fan of playing cards that do nothing but apply Frost, because they fall off pretty hard in boss fights. Regeneration is a card that I've considered occasionally, but I tend to be confident enough at this point in my playstyle that I don't need it. And if you do not need to heal, Regeneration is a card that does nothing. And especially when we already have the Invigorates. So Mind Blast is an amazing way to output damage for us, because it deals damage based on our maximum mana. We have often a lot of maximum mana. Mind Blast will do often 40 to 60 damage, and upgraded it does even more. Scrying Blast is another card that goes in and out of this deck a lot, because dealing 5 damage to all enemies isn't much, but drawing 1 spell is pretty good, because it means that it can chain into other things, and it is an AoE, and that's okay. It doesn't do that much damage, but if we have extra mana, it's very good. And the upgraded version, drawing 2 spells and being only 2 mana, is incredibly powerful. Likewise, Shielding Bolt is another card that I've considered, because because damage is a thing this deck can struggle with, and getting shield is a thing this deck can struggle with, and this does both. So Contemplate is straight card draw. It is it can draw mana as well as non-mana, which is still a thing I value pretty highly, which is why it's in my card pool, while stuff like Introspection is not. I'm trying to think. At this point, I think... Oh, I do have Introspection actually in the pool, that's right. But I don't have Spell Scry, and this is why I also have Contemplate. There is another card... Oh, Overthink is a card that has grown on me a lot, largely because the upgraded version only costs 2 mana, which makes Overthink Plus an incredibly good upgrade. Drawing 3 cards that can include mana cards for 2 mana is a very good deal, and is better than just about any other. And the downside of adding Exhaustion hurts a little bit, but that's just such a good payoff. So Arcane Nova and Arcane Visions, so Arcane Nova is interesting to me because in Breach Wanderers, we have a lot of cards that do damage to all enemies that because they deal damage to all enemies, they are very inefficient. So if you look at like Fireball, if you're fighting only one enemy, 5 damage and burn 2 is, for 6 men, is a terrible rate. And because of that, because there are a lot of fights where you're fighting only 1 or 2 enemies, especially a lot of the most dangerous fights like elite fights or boss fights where you're only fighting 1 or 2 enemies, I don't tend to like running AoE effects that are that inefficient against that small groups. But Arcane Nova providing 10 Arcane to all enemies is just so incredibly valuable against some fights. Like, again, the Drakes in Area 2 are the big one that come to mind, but there's other fights as well. Where, especially we're Raodan, so we're getting 2 growth for every Arcane proc we get off of this. It's worth it to me. Likewise, Arcane Vision, it is card draw, and it applies Arcane. So that is 2 things that we like doing. And this is kind of the other reason that I don't know that I necessarily would need to add Overthink, is that we do have other card draw available to us. I'm not running Height of Knowledge because, so for Height of Knowledge to be worthwhile, you really need to be getting 4 cards, and we don't have any ways to generate wits in our base deck. And so if you don't have the wits, you're guaranteed to only get a maximum of 3. And so we're usually only going to be able to get the 1 card from Adept and the 1 card from Growth, and sometimes the 2 cards from Wits. And 6 mana draw 4 is good, but 6 mana sometimes don't draw anything is very bad. Height of Knowledge is a card that, again, has been in and out of the deck. I sometimes like it, I sometimes don't, and I just ultimately am not totally certain how I feel about it. So Mana Barrier is the best shield card in the game. Even if you aren't on a dedicated growth deck, it is 2 mana for usually, because it's 6 mana, but you gain 4 back immediately. So it is functionally 2 mana for a significant amount of shield, and especially in, again, the Raodan deck, this will be a lot of shield. Chilling Focus should be in the card pool. I don't know why it's not. I think we will cut, we're definitely going to cut something for the Chilling Focus, because additional Chilling Focuses are just something that you want. Sublime Blast is another card that I've tried, and I think ultimately this falls into that category of AoE cards that don't do quite enough to justify the very high cost. So I think the only other common in the card pool is Introspection, which draws 2 non-mana, because, again, I like having card draw. I value having card draw pretty highly, because once you have a lot of mana, you need cards to spend it on, and so we do that in a mixture of having expensive cards that just cost a lot of mana outright. That's why Singularity is in the pool, and also by having cards that let us draw more cards, that give us more things to spend mana on. So I have to decide now what I'm going to cut. And I think at this point, because I've spent 23 minutes, I am going to cut this down as a video that is just talking about designing the deck, and I'm going to separate this into 2 videos because I figure there will be people who just want to watch the run and do not want to listen to me talk through my deck building process, and there will be people who might find watching the deck building process interesting, but who won't necessarily want to sit through the whole run with it. So let me think. And if I post, I'm probably going to post this video link to the Breach Wanderers Discord, which is almost certainly how you found it. But in case it isn't, if you have Breach Wanderers, there's a link in the game to the official Discord. And if you go to the #ShareYourDeck channel in the game discussion section, there will be a link to this video, and next to the link to this video will be I will export the deck list so that if you wanted to try it for yourself, you would be able to easily import it. Although I believe on mobile right now, importing decks is bugged, but presumably that'll be fixed in the next few days. One day, the developer One Day is currently out camping, so let's get the Predator's Focus, I think, for the Chilling Focus. I do still kind of want to move that Hunt in. I kind of want to move the Overthink in. I'm not sure what I would cut for them, though. So this is another thing to pay attention to as we go through, because the Regrowth currently I think is the weakest card potentially, but I still want to try it because I haven't. So one of the things to watch for, that I'm going to be watching for as I go through the actual run, is trying to answer the question, which of these cards that I'm offered do not feel like they are actually useful, because when we're looking at a card pool, of course, this is all in theory. You know, you look at a card like, I mean, any of them, you know, Arcane Bolt, and you ask yourself, okay, Arcane Bolt, can I imagine a deck where I would want Arcane Bolt? The answer is yes. But then when I'm playing, the question is, if I see Arcane Bolt as an actual choice, am I actually taking it? And if the answer is no, I don't want to, especially if we hit one of those points, which you saw a lot in the inner run, because it was a quick play run, so it was completely random what we saw, where it's like, I don't like any of these, but I have to take something, which happens in quick play a decent amount because, you know, you don't have any control. But if you're ever seeing that in a game you're playing with a card pool, that's a sign that something is wrong with your card pool, and you should take note of which cards it was that you saw that you thought, these are just bad and I do not want them. So with that, I am going to go ahead and stop this video, and then I will probably include a link in the description of this video to the follow-up, which will be actually playing a run with this deck. And I plan to upload these like back to back. So if you are watching this on YouTube, I don't know where else you'll be watching it, there will almost certainly be a video follow-up already up with the run. All right, so goodbye for very briefly, or forever if you're not going to watch that video.